Honor and privilege to have the one and only Adam Silver here in attendance with us. Thank you for being here, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
Yo, absolutely. I just want to get right to it. I'm thinking about last season, and the NBA set records for total attendance, average attendance, percentage of capacity, and sellouts. 22.2 million total fans in attendance, 791 sellouts, an average attendance of 18,077, 97% capacity. Those are the numbers that I have. It would seem like the NBA is in a fantastic position looking on the outside in. Tell us how you feel about where you guys are right now.
Thanks for reading all those statistics. No, we're in a great position. I think from a attendance standpoint, as you said, almost you can't fit more people in our arena, so there's not a lot of growth that will come there. I mean, we're always, hats off to our teams and improving the experience. You go to a lot of games, everything's gotten better from the food to the way, the hospitality, everything along the lines there. But so really then it's about media. Of course, you and your folks at ESPN are our partners, have been for many years. And I think what we're seeing now is this transition where people first look to their phones, rather than to televisions these days. So the question is, how can we do a better job presenting our games to people, particularly a younger audience that lives on their phone as opposed to being in front of a television? And I think it's not just taking those same, call it a stream that's on conventional television, moving it to your phone. It's taking advantage of all the functionality that comes with personalization, customization, alerts, the engagement that comes through fantasy, betting, merchandising. All of that will be part of the experience going forward, and all on a global basis.
You guys have been in the news a lot over the last few weeks, particularly when it came to the player participation policy. Obviously, there were rules changes, some things that were implemented to address concerns about players treating the regular season with the level of priority you guys would like. Speak to that for a second in terms of the player participation policy, the reason you felt the need for it, and how you think it's going to work.
Absolutely. And in fairness to our players, it was as much a team issue as a player issue. And I understand it. I think in the day and age of analytics, teams, and we're seeing this in all sports, they become laser-like focused on the ultimate prize, which is winning the championship. And then they're willing to sacrifice, in essence, in some cases, fan interest during the regular season because, at least from their standpoint, they had data that was showing them that if they rested players tactically, strategically at certain games, they would be better off. I think, one, we're hearing loud and clearly from our fans, the media as a proxy for the fans, that people are disappointed. I mean, I put aside those terrible stories of, a family going to the game, but I think even in terms of where it really scales, from a media standpoint, if we expect people to care about our regular season, our players and our teams have to be fully invested in being out there. And as Joe Dumars, our head of basketball operations, has said, we've got to reinforce the fact we're an 82-game league. You can almost hear Joe say it, 82-game league. And the expectation is that if players are healthy, they will play. And as I said, that's not just directed to our players, it's directed at our teams, our general managers. Everyone in the organization has to understand that this is a fan-first business, that particularly because of some of the media changes we talked about, that we're moving less away from sort of a bundle environment where you just pay one price and you get everything. This notion that I'm only going to pay for what I want. And so it's also a response to the marketplace, a realization that in order to keep our business going, we have to constantly be putting our best foot forward. And that's where the notion of a play-in tournament came from. I'm sure the in-season tournament we'll talk about, which is new this season. Just things to create more excitement throughout the regular season. But as you said, I think sometimes there's a notion that something's very broken. I don't agree with that at all. As you started with the data on what we're seeing in terms of attendance, all-time record attendance. So the fans are also telling us they love this product, the coverage we have around the clock. I think this is more a little bit around the edges because by all means, and again, going back to Joe Dumars, during his day, he'll tell stories. A lot of players you and I know well, former players, played when they shouldn't have been playing. And there's no attempt here to turn the clock back. We're not looking for guys to play through injuries. We're just looking for guys to recognize that, we got to be focused on the fans, and that if you're healthy, you may be a little bit banged up. The expectation is you'll play. Even, and I think this gets a little bit confused too, there's what Joe Dumars has out been saying recently. It's sort of the headline is load management doesn't work. I think what where we've learned is it doesn't necessarily work in terms of injury prevention, but there's no question that if you're playing in the second game of a back-to-back, there's diminished performance to a certain degree, to the extent guys are tired or they've been playing multiple games on the road. Their performance will dip a little bit, but it's still the expectation that if you're not going to hurt yourself, you got to be out there.
What about the player, whether directly or indirectly, that looks at it and says, it's being perceived as if it's our fault? I know you just alluded to it not always being the fault. You're not directing it at just the players. You're directing it at the teams, because covering the league, team doctors, the guys in the analytics department, they collaborate with one another. They may come to the conclusion that a player may not need to play. They may make that decision for the player, and the player has to capitulate to whatever they suggest, and the players are taking the heat for it. You had a lot of people out there, particularly with Kawhi Leonard along with others, they sort of gave the impression they were taking heat that was undeserved. What do you say to the players? What do you say to the public about the players when it comes to that?
I say that we have this incredible partnership with the Players Association. Tamika Tremalio is the executive director, CJ McCollum now as the president. And when we came together in collective bargaining and to talk about this issue, there wasn't a lot of dissent in the room. We agreed to the 65-game minimum. That's sort of a separate issue in terms of being eligible for awards. But I hope nobody thinks that means there's an expectation guys will only play 65 games. That takes into account injuries, sometimes long, multiple game injuries throughout the season. So we landed on that. But again, within the room, I think there was a consensus that this is a joint issue, called, team league, team player issue, and that there's a little bit of fault for everybody. I would say there are some cases, I think, particularly with younger players, I'd say it's less about a veteran player issue, where to the extent they come into the league and it seems to be the norm, that the expectation isn't that we have an 82-game season. I think we had to reset there. Mm-hmm. But again, I say more directly, we're not saying this is a player-only issue. We're saying that for the entire league, we all need to come together. And again, as Joe Dumars says, we are an 82-game league.
The WNBA has a finals going on. I'm looking at the Liberty. I'm looking at the Aces. I'm enjoying what I'm seeing here. How is the league feeling about the WNBA at this particular moment in time, particularly this finals matchup and the effect that it's had on the sport of basketball?
And I would be remiss if I didn't remind your viewers that Game 4 is on 8 o'clock ESPN tonight.
Oh, we're going to do
here
that.
At Barclays Center.
Yeah,
so, and I was there Sunday, and I think it was the highest attendance record for a WNBA playoff game. I mean, it was electric at Barclays Center. Home team won. Fans were going crazy in terms of the Liberty Aces. I'm thrilled. I think Kathy Engelbert, my colleague, who's the commissioner of the WNBA, is doing a fantastic job. I think, and as all her predecessors did, I think, from the very first days of Val Ackerman being the president of the league, there was always that understanding that this is going to take time to build, that you can't create these kinds of traditions in leagues, not only not overnight, but you have to take a long-term view. Again, our friend David Stern, amazing person and visionary, and he recognized that despite, as you remember, it wasn't just the first year, second year. I'd say for the first 10 years of the WNBA, first question whoever was running the league would get is, are you going to shut down this season? And I think David, sort of maybe behind the scenes in most cases, was saying, no, we're going to continue to invest in this league and we're going to continue building it. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that now. So still lots of things to improve on. I hear from players directly, more charters, better, facilities. We're in the process of expanding. Commissioner Engelbert just announced we're going to San Francisco, with the Warriors organization.
Yeah.
So the league will invariably continue to grow. What I love seeing, I think over time, it's ultimately about the talent on the floor. And you're seeing, as the WNBA continues to prosper, as well as women's college basketball, you see a larger pool of great female athletes turning to this sport. Because just like in basketball, a lot of the best athletes, often are multi-sport players, when they're younger, and then choose a sport along the way. And to the extent women are choosing to play basketball because they see there's a professional career down the road, college scholarships on top of that, we're seeing great talent. And again, I think the game tonight is just, will be another example of it. Great competition, great coaching, but it's going to continue to build. So I'm thrilled with what I'm seeing.
Very last question, just a minute left here. Your thoughts about player involvement in the media? You got a whole bunch of guys that got podcasts now. They're speaking their minds about a lot of different things, a lot of different issues. Sometimes it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, sometimes not so much. But overall, your thoughts, whether it's the Draymond Greens, I'm not asking you to highlight a player, but just guys having media platforms and venturing into that lane, particularly while they're participants as players in the National Basketball Association. Your thoughts about that?
I think it's fantastic. You know firsthand from discussions we've had for many decades, I'm very encouraging of players speaking out on issues that are important to them. I mean, of course, I want players to do their homework and be knowledgeable about issues they're speaking out on. Sort of, it's a little bit of a joke, but it's sort of anything but just don't criticize officiating. You know? But in all seriousness, there are guardrails. I think they recognize, and once in a while, players will cross them in terms of language that's appropriate, other societal places where I think they understand they're part of a larger organization, and that what's one thing, I get the fact that some fans may be upset or that they disagree with a player's particular political point of view. I'm completely accepting of that. I think there are other areas, again, more around respect and decency and things like that, where, again, we just got to make sure there's parameters to players doing media themselves. But part of it is they're creating companies, they're building wealth for themselves and their families. But lastly, I think there's this amazing hunger for it. It wouldn't be happening in the marketplace if fans didn't want it. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is, for particularly our hardcore fans, they can't get enough of our players. And ultimately for the league, that demonstration that they aren't one-dimensional, that there's so much more to them than being ball players. As you said, as we move towards a third of our players who come from outside the United States, they speak about global issues. They have interests in whether it's fashion, food, watches, whatever it is that fascinates people. That the more people learn about them, I think the more likely they are then to want to tune in and see them play basketball.